Wow, talk about coming full circle, guys. Uncharted Drake's Fortune was one of the very first games I reviewed on this channel, and although it was a couple years too late back then, I still wanted to post some content for the game and share my thoughts, and did so before the sequel was coming out. Now, I have spoken about this many times before, but doing videos like these allow me to kind of centralize my thoughts about a particular game, all having it in one place. And let's be honest, this content is more or less a celebration of the era and looking back at that time period, where I was, what I was doing, and what the game meant to me back then and what it means now. So that being said, I'm going to more or less reshare my story about why the first Uncharted was just such a big moment for me and went on to become one of my favorite game franchises of all time. Now, back in 2006, we had the release of Tomb Raider Legend, which in effect was my very first Tomb Raider game, and I just fell in love with the action platformer genre back then. So when I tuned in to G4 TV back in the day and watched the quite boring Sony E3 2006 conference, the one game that really stood out to me was the very first Uncharted. It was fully revealed back then with a gameplay trailer, or rather an in-engine trailer, and Nathan Drake in his original baseball tee, showcasing just some downright gorgeous visuals. I just remember afterwards going on to quite heavily look up all the information I could find on the game. And while I was on YouTube back then, during this time, it wouldn't have been another year until I started actually making some content on my original channel. So I just recall sort of, getting really excited, watching high quality 480p 4:3 aspect ratio videos of Uncharted Drake's Fortune. I mean, you could barely tell what was going on. The quality was quite poor. But I knew in that moment, more than anything, I wanted a PlayStation 3 specifically for that game. And I had asked my parents to get it for me during Christmas, but admittedly the $600 price tag was probably a bit of a tough pill to swallow back then. And even if money was no object, just getting one around the time of release was excruciatingly difficult. But it was the next year, in 2007, when Uncharted Drake's Fortune would have been released. And 1 month later, for Christmas, I did in fact get my PlayStation 3. I got the 80GB EO1 model bundled with MotorStorm, and my parents also picked me up Uncharted Drake's Fortune as well. In fact, it was a killer deal at the Sony store. Those of you who are old enough may remember that Sony had these retail stores called Sony Style. And the deal was at the time that if you bought a PS3, you got 5 free Blu-ray movies with your purchase. And considering that they were selling, the MotorStorm bundled game as well, it was just a tremendous deal, all for $500 US. So I got quite the treat during that year. I even got an extra 6-axis controller as well. And I don't even want to think about all the money that must have cost back then, but I was really, really excited. I didn't even have an HD TV. I hooked up the PS3 to my Sony Trinitron. It was 40i resolution with S-video output, and I just plugged my console in and started playing. That particular memory will probably never leave me. I think back about that time often, and I just recall like the moment my dad walked into the room, and he was just completely shocked at the graphics on display. It really felt like you were watching a movie almost. It was quite a significant jump going from the PS2 playing games like that to what Uncharted Drake's Fortune was doing on the PS3. I think I probably beat this game in maybe 1 day or two. Kind of hard to remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure I just played it all day and night. And it was Christmas break during that time, so there was no worries about school. I was just going heavy on playing this game. I beat it, and then I started a new game afterwards and beat it again on the crushing difficulty. I collected all the treasure and just got completely addicted to the third-person gameplay, the characters, the visuals, and the sound design. I mean, don't get me wrong, I played MotorStorm when it came with my PS3. I definitely played that. And I did already do a Reminiscing video on MotorStorm and talk about my thoughts about that. But for Uncharted, I think to this date, and honestly, I don't even think I'm exaggerating, but I probably played through this game, including this particular playthrough all these years later, about 8 times. No joke, that's what I would hazard as a guess, because it was one of those that I just went back to time and time again, and I played heavily before the sequel came out, and then when the sequel came out and the third game was coming out, I played through both of them again, and I remember playing through this game even again right before the remaster collection came out for PS4. So judging from a couple of playthroughs back then, I didn't have multiplayer gaming until about a year or two afterwards, so just replaying single player titles was like a big thing for me. So I'm going to break down all the elements about why I enjoyed my time with Uncharted Drake's Fortune so much. For me, it's really the central pillar of it, and it's really the gameplay. Again, coming off of the Tomb Raider franchise, being really into everything that series was about, seeing a game which embodied that adventure spirit, but brought about it a lot more of a relatable cast, better visuals, just a more believable-ish scenario. It just got me hooked from the very beginning. I mean, Nathan Drake here just has such a likable personality. He was quite a departure at the time from the more generic heroes that we saw, the military soldier types, the anti-heroes as well, and this plagued many games back during this era. So having someone who is sort of written as this more laid-back, a slightly egotistical but still very fun personality type of dude who you could just imagine being sort of your next door neighbor was just excellent. The other cast members and the villains as well, all written just as eloquently, and everyone has just played their role as if born to do so. You really have to give massive credit as well to Amy Hennig for just really bringing this cast together and writing these characters. You just immediately care for them the moment they appear on screen. You root for them as well, and just the chemistry between the cast here is just so, it's like magic. Now, the story of Uncharted 1 is quite lengthy for what it is. I remember this game was around 10 to 12 hours originally when I got into it. However, as you're more experienced with the game and you're kind of walking your way through it, you can beat this game in probably more about 8. And especially if you're rushing it, you can even probably do less than that. But it's got this danger around every corner type of survival vibe, being that this game largely takes place in one central location, one island. They did a great job making you feel like you're traveling through these lush jungles, exploring these ruins, giving this island a huge historical significance that relates to a massive plot twist later on. And I certainly don't care to spoil anything, even though this game is nearing on 20 years old. I still know people to this day that have yet to play it. And I feel this is a franchise that is just going to live rent-free in people's minds for decades to come. Let's take a quick break and review the cover art for Uncharted Drake's Fortune. This is my original PS3 copy I got for Christmas in 2007. I never got rid of it. I never traded it in, and everything here is original. So yeah, it's quite awesome to still have this copy, and I just love the cover art. I love the case and just all the art and screenshots and everything that encompasses, and just the old PlayStation 3 badge and stuff. I think that's awesome. Now inside, we just got a great example of just how to put together a game, a physical version of the game. We got a great game disc, we have art on the back, and just an exceptional manual. Everything about this is just awesome. It's in the style of Sir Francis Drake's journal, so you just get like all these kind of burned and kind of torn pages and stuff like that. Full color, just all the information regarding the game and the systems, the options and stuff like that. Just everything that you want to learn about, it's all here. So I just love the way that they put this together and the whole style. It just really got you immersed into the game and everything that they were putting. And it's just a shame that we really don't get manuals or just details like this anymore. It's quite sad to see. So anyway, yeah, cool look at the manual there. Now on the back, we got some great artwork. Some of the concept art for the game development and stuff like that just looks fantastic. And just really like that PlayStation 3 was kind of doing this, or Sony was doing this with the clear cases. It just really sold the idea that these were premium, versions of games and stuff. Anyway, really cool look at Uncharted Drake's Fortune. Now, visually, it certainly helped at the time that Uncharted Drake's Fortune was perhaps the most beautiful game that we've seen on the PS3. This was one of those games that really showcased the power of that console and just how much more you could do with the RSX chipset. I recall hearing that the development of Uncharted was actually very frustrating for Naughty Dog, not because of any of the creative problems with the game and the changes that they made, but rather the learning curve surrounding the new hardware of the PS3. It's just saw many designers and coders leave the company abruptly because of this. But regardless, Uncharted is still a beautiful game to this day. You just have great character models, a lush, vibrant jungle atmosphere, volumetrics and HDR lighting. I mean, all of this comes together to create a game that at the time just looked like no other. In fact, I guess at the time, this game would have probably been eclipsed by Crysis on PC if you were playing that game, because this did come out in the same month. But for consoles, in particular, seeing a game like this that looked like this really brought home the idea that the PS3's RSX chip was indeed capable of all that hype. And while it didn't quite look CG, you still got a game that looked better than really anything else on the market at the time. Now, this is the original game on PS3. This is not the remaster, and it runs at a native 720p and 30 frames per second. There are some dips and unoptimization, and this manifests in the way of screen tearing, which you may be able to pick up upon in this video. But honestly, still to this day, I think the game looks very solid. It was fluid for what it is, and honestly, playing it now, I mean, look at this, guys. You're looking at the native PS3 version. This isn't the remaster. You be the judge. I honestly can't imagine anyone saying that this game looks bad, even after nearing 20 years on from its original release. It's got a timeless look, and you can definitely appreciate some of the artistic touches that they've made to really bring this world to life. Now, moving on to sound design, this also complements the visuals in such a great way. We got to talk about the music because it's just so iconic. I mean, the Uncharted theme just sticks immediately in your brain the moment that you hear it. You also have great music for action and somber moments, and Greg Edmondson, the composer, just used some very unique and interesting instruments to compose this one. And I think I bought the soundtrack for this way back in the day on iTunes. So, I just really enjoyed listening to it back then, and even today when it plays, I can almost immediately recall which scene and which moment that track is playing for. Voice acting is once again stellar. I mean, everyone here is just wonderful. Nolan North is known for being the most prolific voice actors in the industry, but this character and this performance of his may just be his most notorious. Everyone else here is equally iconic as well and just delivers a career best performance. The rest of the audio package is just so well put together. The guns are meaty, the grenades have impact. The audio here isn't quite perhaps as bombastic as what we would have gotten in Uncharted 2, but everything here is just balanced to perfection, and there's just no issues with anything relating to how it sounds. Now, the gameplay elements of Uncharted Drake's Fortune sort of combine your typical third-person cover fare, although it is important to keep in mind where third-person shooters, were during this era. We just had the Gears of War series come out a year prior to this, which would just go on to be heavily influential. But I really think Uncharted here delivers a very well-handling game that just ages very gracefully. The controls are responsive. I think if you pick up this game today, you'll notice that the gunplay is very accurate, the movement is agile. I think you'd be hard-pressed to say that the game hasn't aged well. There are perhaps some elements and some difficulty spikes that you may have issues with, but in terms of the way the game controls, it just meshes really well with today's control scheme and layout, and it's really comfortable to start playing. I just really enjoy the gameplay here. Perhaps the only thing I can really complain about is the forced 6-axis motion controls, which do affect your ability to kind of bounce across beams as well as, handle the grenade arcs. But admittedly, because I played the game so many times, I just got really good at this to the point where I can throw a grenade super quickly with great accuracy, but that's more or less just due to me investing so much time in the game. I think someone picking this up might kind of be a little bit turned off or just kind of have a little bit of a learning curve getting used to the slower paced gunplay compared to what you could do in Uncharted 2 and 3 with the gameplay improvements. But you can blind fire, grenades, and that sort of acts as a quick throw, so you're basically leaving it up to chance depending on where it hits and lands. But many of these elements would be improved upon in the sequel. The hand-to-hand fighting as well kind of suffers a bit. You have these hand-to-hand combos which can yield greater ammo drops depending on how you want to take out your enemies, but doing kind of complex combos could also result in sort of inputs being dropped. So, as you're kind of playing through the game, you'll have to contend with a bit of these control issues. But I think generally speaking, this isn't going to really, bog down your experience. And I think you'll have a great time playing this original version if you want to give it a shot. I think that Uncharted Drake's Fortune, and it's interesting because speaking about it today, it's such an iconic franchise, such a true PlayStation staple. But back then, we really had no idea how any of this would turn out. We just had the good graces of, Naughty Dog being at the helm, creating the Jack and Daxter and the Crash series. So we probably all knew it would be good, but the level of impact it truly had would go on to just be just rippling throughout this industry, even to this day. It's quite remarkable. I think this style of writing, this type of cast, the type of game it is, just really went on to inspire many games after it, and how that all kind of came together, and what it did for the industry. But, in any case, I just love the original Uncharted here. I still love this original version on PS3. It's why I kept the disc all these years. It's my original copy. I never got rid of it since I got it as a Christmas gift. And obviously, the version to play if you want to try this out for the first time today would be the PS4 remaster in full HD and 60 FPS. But even for this original version, which I barely see people even make content on anymore, it still looks great. It still plays great. And I just had a great time replaying it again after all these years. It was also great to re-review the game here, and just do it more justice than I could have ever hoped to back when I was 14 and kind of just getting into YouTube. So I'm glad to have done that here. And for those of you who played the first Uncharted, I would really like to know what you guys think. And I would love to know where you were when the original Uncharted was released. It's crazy to me that this game is nearing 20 years old. There are people who, have been born after the first Uncharted and are well in their teenage years now, and probably have no idea, or just were too young to have experienced this. And so, perhaps they picked up the remaster later on. It's just remarkable how much time flies. But if you are a fan, and if you were there at launch like myself, I would really like to hear from you, or even if you just discovered the game and franchise many years later. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic day. I thank you so much for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you very much.